The Book of Genesis, a name that echoes with the weight of history, of beginnings, of the very foundation of our understanding of the universe and humanity's place within it. It is a book that has captivated and challenged readers for millennia, a tapestry woven from ancient stories passed down through generations, finally taking form in the written word. Here, in this sacred text, we encounter the grand narrative of creation, a story that speaks to the deepest questions of existence, purpose, and the very essence of what it means to be human. Genesis, the first book of the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Old Testament, is a book of profound significance. It is a book that lays the groundwork for our understanding of God, humanity, and the intricate relationship between them. It is a book that grapples with the mysteries of creation, the nature of good and evil, and the consequences of human choice. And it is within the pages of Genesis that we find the seeds of faith, hope, and redemption that will blossom throughout the biblical narrative. Our journey through Genesis begins with the act of creation itself, a story that has resonated with cultures across time and space. The creation narrative of Genesis stands in stark contrast to the creation myths of other ancient cultures. While many of those myths attributed the origin of the world to the actions of capricious gods or the chaotic interplay of primordial forces, Genesis presents a God who is both powerful and orderly, a God who brings forth the universe through a series of deliberate and purposeful acts. There is a sense of intentionality of design that permeates the entire creation account. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, the text declares, a statement of breathtaking simplicity and profound significance. With these words, the foundation of all that is laid. The universe, in all its vastness and complexity, is not the result of chance or accident, but the deliberate creation of a loving and purposeful God. This act of creation, ex nihilo, out of nothing, is a concept that has challenged theologians and philosophers for centuries. How can something come from nothing? The human mind struggles to grasp the immensity of such a concept, and yet Genesis invites us to embrace the mystery, to acknowledge the limits of our understanding, and to stand in awe of a God whose power knows no bounds. The creation narrative is not merely a scientific account of the origins of the universe, nor is it intended to be. Rather, it is a theological statement, a poetic expression of the truth that God is the ultimate source and sustainer of all that exists. It is a story that speaks to the human heart, reminding us that we are not alone in the vastness of the cosmos, but are part of a grand and intricate design created by a God who loves us and cares for us. The opening verses of Genesis describe a world shrouded in darkness, a formless void where chaos reigns, yet even in this primordial darkness there is a glimmer of hope, a promise of what is to come. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. With these words, spoken by the divine Creator, the darkness is pierced and the process of creation begins. The theme of light and darkness is a recurring motif throughout the Bible, often used to symbolize good and evil, truth and falsehood, life and death. In the creation narrative, light represents the very presence of God, the source of life and order. Darkness, on the other hand, represents the void, the nothingness that existed before God spoke the world into being. It is through the spoken word that God brings order out of chaos, transforming the formless void into a universe teeming with life and beauty. And God said, the text repeats, highlighting the power of God's word to bring about his divine will. Each spoken command is an act of creation, each phrase a testament to the limitless power of the Creator. The creation narrative is structured around a series of divine pronouncements, each one followed by the phrase, "and it was so." This refrain emphasizes the effortless ease with which God brings about his creative purposes. There is no struggle, no resistance, only the unwavering obedience of creation to the will of its Creator. With each spoken word, the universe unfolds, revealing the glory and majesty of its Maker. The creation of light marks the first day of creation, a day that symbolizes the emergence of order from chaos. God separates the light from the darkness, calling the light day and the darkness night. This act of separation establishes a rhythm to creation, a cycle of light and darkness that will govern the passage of time and provide a framework for life on Earth. It is important to note that the creation narrative is not intended to be a literal scientific account of the origins of the universe. The days of creation should not be understood as 24-hour periods, but rather as symbolic epochs representing the stages of God's creative work. The Genesis account is a theological narrative, a poetic expression of the truth that God is the creator and sustainer of all that is. On the second day, God creates the expanse, separating the waters above from the waters below. This expanse, called the sky or firmament, forms a barrier between the heavens and the earth, further establishing order and structure within creation. The separation of the waters is also significant because it creates the conditions necessary for life to flourish. The third day sees the creation of dry land and vegetation. God commands the waters to recede, revealing the earth beneath. He then speaks into existence plants and trees, covering the land with lush greenery. This act of creation introduces the concept of life itself, as plants are the first living organisms to appear on Earth. The creation of vegetation also highlights God's provision for his creation, as plants will serve as a source of food and sustenance for the creatures that will soon inhabit the land. Section 5. Order from Chaos. With each passing day, the creation narrative reveals a progression from chaos to order, from darkness to light, from formlessness to form. On the fourth day, God creates the sun, moon, and stars, setting them in the expanse of the sky to govern the day and the night and to mark seasons, days, and years. These celestial bodies serve not only as sources of light but also as markers of time, further emphasizing the orderliness and structure of God's creation. The creation of the sun, moon, and stars also challenges the polytheistic beliefs of the ancient world, where these celestial bodies were often worshipped as deities. Genesis affirms that the sun, moon, and stars are not gods but creations of the one true God, who alone is worthy of worship. They are testaments to his power and majesty, reminders of his sovereignty over all creation. On the fifth day, God turns his attention to the waters and the skies, creating the creatures that will inhabit these realms. He commands the waters to teem with living creatures, filling the oceans with fish and other marine animals. He then creates birds, giving them the ability to fly above the earth. The creation of these creatures further emphasizes the diversity and abundance of God's creation, as well as his care and provision for all living things. The sixth day of creation marks the pinnacle of God's creative work as he forms humankind in his own image. This act of creation sets humanity apart from all other creatures, bestowing upon us a unique dignity and worth. It is in our capacity to reflect the image of God that we find our true purpose and meaning. Section 4. The breath of life again. The creation of Eve, Adam's counterpart, is equally profound. God takes one of Adam's ribs, closing up the flesh in its place, and fashions from it a woman. This act of creation from Adam's side emphasizes the close connection between man and woman, a bond that is not merely physical, but also spiritual and emotional. The rib, a bone that protects the heart and lungs, symbolizes the intimacy and vulnerability that will characterize the relationship between man and woman. Eve, created from Adam's very being, is literally bone of his bones and flesh of his flesh, a testament to the profound unity and interdependence that God intended for humanity. This act of creation also highlights the equality of man and woman in the eyes of God. Eve is not created as Adam's subordinate, but as his helper, a partner who will stand beside him, sharing in the responsibilities and joys of life in the garden. Section 5. A sacred trust, a solemn warning. Within the idyllic setting of the Garden of Eden, God establishes a covenant with Adam, a sacred agreement that will shape the relationship between humanity and the divine for generations to come. This covenant, rooted in love and trust, outlines both the blessings and the responsibilities that come with being created in God's image. God grants Adam dominion over the garden, entrusting him with the care and cultivation of all living creatures. This dominion, however, is not one of tyrannical rule, but rather of loving stewardship. Adam is called to be a caretaker, a shepherd, a guardian of the delicate balance of Eden. However, this freedom comes with a caveat, a solemn warning that will have profound consequences for Adam and all his descendants. God places a single prohibition upon Adam. He must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This tree, shrouded in mystery, represents a boundary, a limit to human knowledge and experience. Section 8. A broken world and a promise. The expulsion from the Garden of Eden marks the beginning of a new chapter in human history, a chapter marked by toil, suffering, and death. Yet even in the midst of this fallen world, God does not abandon his creation. He continues to love and care for humanity, offering glimpses of hope and redemption throughout the biblical narrative. The story of Adam and Eve is not just a story of the past, it is a story that resonates with us today. We, like them, are created in God's image, endowed with free will and the capacity for both great love and devastating sin. We too face temptations, make choices, and experience the consequences of our actions. The fall of humankind serves as a stark reminder of our need for a Savior, one who can bridge the gap between God and humanity, atone for our sins, and restore us to a right relationship with our Creator. This promise of redemption is woven throughout the fabric of the Bible, culminating in the person and work of Jesus Christ, the ultimate expression of God's love and mercy. Section 1. The Garden of Delight. And so, the stage is set for the next act in our creation drama. With the universe formed and teeming with life, Genesis draws our attention to a specific location, a place of singular beauty and abundance, the Garden of Eden. This garden, planted by the hand of God himself, stands as a testament to the Lord's boundless creativity and his profound love for his most cherished creation, humanity. The Garden of Eden, often depicted as a paradise of verdant landscapes and shimmering waters, represents a state of perfect harmony between God, humanity, and nature. Here, in this idyllic setting, Adam, the first human, is placed. Adam, whose name in Hebrew means earth or ground, embodies the very essence of creation, formed from the dust of the earth itself. Within the protective embrace of Eden, Adam is given a profound responsibility, a sacred trust that will shape the destiny of all humankind. God instructs Adam to tend and keep the garden, to cultivate its beauty and abundance. Section 2. A river's embrace. Genesis describes the Garden of Eden as being watered by a river that flowed out of it, parting into 4 headwaters. This river, a symbol of life and sustenance, represents the abundance and fertility of the garden, a place where every need is met and every desire is fulfilled. The 4 rivers that flow from Eden, each named and given a specific geographical location, further emphasize the garden's centrality in the created order. The presence of precious metals and stones in the lands watered by these rivers speaks to the richness and beauty of creation, a world adorned with treasures both hidden and revealed. The mention of gold, bdellium, and onyx evokes a sense of wonder and awe, hinting at the splendor of this primordial paradise. Yet, amidst this abundance, there is a solitary figure, Adam, entrusted with the care of this magnificent creation, but lacking a companion, a being with whom to share its wonders and joys. This sense of solitude, hinted at in the text, sets the stage for the creation of Eve, Adam's counterpart and partner in the grand adventure of life. God, in his infinite wisdom and love, recognizes Adam's need for companionship and sets about fashioning a helper suitable for him. Section 3, formed from the dust. The creation of Adam is described in Genesis with a poignant intimacy. God forms Adam from the dust of the ground, breathing into his nostrils the breath of life. This act of creation, so different from the creation of the rest of the natural world, highlights the special place that humanity occupies in the created order. The image of God shaping Adam from the dust evokes a sense of tenderness and care, a potter molding clay into a vessel of beauty and purpose. It speaks to the intimate connection between God and humanity, a relationship forged in the very act of creation. The breath of life, breathed into Adam's lifeless form, signifies the divine spark that animates us, that which sets us apart from all other creatures. It is this breath of God that gives us our soul, our consciousness, our very being. It is this breath that makes us, in the words of Genesis, living beings. And so we come to the pivotal moment in the Genesis narrative, the event that will cast a long shadow over the history of humanity, the fall of humankind. It is a story of temptation, disobedience, and the devastating consequences of straying from God's plan. Into the idyllic paradise of Eden, a cunning and deceptive serpent slithers, its arrival marking a turning point in the story. The serpent, described as more crafty than any other beast of the field, embodies the forces of chaos and temptation that threaten to disrupt the harmony of God's creation. The serpent's target is Eve, the mother of all living, and its weapon of choice is deception. With subtle words, it sows seeds of doubt in Eve's mind, questioning the goodness of God's command and the veracity of his warning. Did God really say, "You must not eat from any tree in the garden"? The serpent asks, its tone laced with skepticism. The serpent's question, seemingly innocent, is designed to undermine Eve's trust in God and to create a sense of discord where once there was only harmony. Eve, initially hesitant, responds by clarifying God's command. She explains that they are free to eat from any tree in the garden except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. To eat from that tree, God has warned, would mean certain death. The serpent, sensing an opportunity to exploit Eve's vulnerability, seizes upon her words. "You will not certainly die," it hisses, contradicting God's direct command. With this bold lie, the serpent challenges God's authority and casts doubt upon his character. The serpent's words are carefully chosen to appeal to Eve's desire for knowledge and her longing for something more than what she already possesses. For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil, the serpent whispers, its voice a seductive murmur in the stillness of the garden. Eve, her mind clouded by the serpent's lies, finds herself drawn to the forbidden fruit. The tree, once a symbol of God's authority and love, now appears desirable, its fruit a source of forbidden knowledge and power. The serpent has successfully distorted God's intentions, twisting his words of warning into a suggestion of something withheld, something precious and desirable kept just out of reach. Gazing at the fruit, Eve sees that it is good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom. The serpent has appealed not only to her intellectual curiosity, but also to her physical senses and her desire for fulfillment. At this critical juncture, Eve faces a choice, a decision that will have far-reaching consequences not only for herself but for all humanity. She can choose to trust God's word, to obey his command and remain within the safety and security of his love and provision. Or she can choose to believe the serpent's lies, to grasp for knowledge and power that are not hers to possess, and to step outside the boundaries of God's design. The tension mounts as Eve weighs her options. The serpent's words echo in her mind, tempting her with the promise of enlightenment, while God's command, once clear and absolute, now seems distant and uncertain. In the end, the allure of the forbidden fruit proves too strong for Eve to resist. She reaches out, plucks the fruit from the branch, and takes a bite. The act is seemingly insignificant, a simple act of disobedience. Yet, In that moment, the world changes irrevocably. Eve, having tasted the fruit, immediately experiences a shift in her perception. Her eyes are opened, but not in the way the serpent had promised. Instead of gaining divine knowledge and understanding, she becomes aware of her nakedness, a nakedness that now fills her with shame and fear. Eve, eager to share this newfound awareness with Adam, offers him the fruit, and he too eats. In that instant, the perfect communion between God and humanity is shattered. Sin, like a deadly poison, enters the world, corrupting the very essence of their being. Adam and Eve, once innocent and free, now experience the full weight of their disobedience. Shame, guilt, and fear wash over them, replacing the joy and contentment they once knew. The consequences of Adam and Eve's sin are swift and devastating. No longer able to bear the presence of the Holy One, they hide from God, their shame and fear palpable. The intimate relationship they once enjoyed with their Creator is fractured, replaced by a sense of separation and dread. God, walking in the garden, calls out to Adam, "Where are you?" It is a question filled with sorrow and longing, a plea for his beloved creation to return to him. Yet Adam, consumed by guilt and fear, can only respond with trembling words, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." God's heart breaks at the sight of his children, created in his image, now marred by sin and consumed by shame. He questions them, seeking to understand the depth of their transgression. "Who told you that you were naked?" he asks, his voice a mixture of sadness and anger. "Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" The consequences of sin are not limited to Adam and Eve. The entire created order is affected by their disobedience. The ground is cursed, thorns and thistles will now choke the earth, and toil and sweat will be the lot of humanity. To the woman, God says, "I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." The harmony of their relationship is disrupted, replaced by a power struggle that will have far-reaching consequences. To the serpent, God pronounces a curse, saying, "Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly, and you will eat dust all the days of your life." The serpent, once a creature of beauty and grace, is now a symbol of deception and evil. And to Adam, God says, "By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return." Death, the ultimate consequence of sin, enters the world, casting a long shadow over all creation. Despite their disobedience, God does not abandon Adam and Eve to their fate. He clothes them in garments of skin, a tangible expression of his love and mercy, covering their shame and providing for their physical needs. This act of compassion foreshadows the ultimate act of redemption that God will one day accomplish through his Son, Jesus Christ. Before sending them out of the garden, God places cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. The garden, once a place of perfect communion with God, is now closed off to humanity, a reminder of what has been lost and a promise of what will one day be restored. The fall of humankind, as depicted in the book of Genesis, is a story of profound tragedy, a stark reminder of the destructive nature of sin and the far-reaching consequences of disobedience. Yet, even in the midst of judgment, God's love and mercy shine through. The expulsion from the Garden of Eden marks the beginning of a new chapter in human history, a chapter marked by toil, suffering, and death. Yet, even in the midst of this fallen world, God does not abandon his creation. He continues to love and care for humanity, offering glimpses of hope and redemption throughout the biblical narrative. The story of Adam and Eve is not just a story of the past. It is a story that resonates with us today. We, like them, are created in God's image, endowed with free will and the capacity for both great love and devastating sin. We too face temptations, make choices, and experience the consequences of our actions. The fall of humankind serves as a stark reminder of our need for a savior, one who can bridge the gap between God and humanity, atone for our sins, and restore us to a right relationship with our Creator. This promise of redemption is woven throughout the fabric of the Bible, culminating in the person and work of Jesus Christ, the ultimate expression of God's love and mercy. The shadow of Eden's loss stretched long over Adam and Eve, a constant reminder of their rebellion and its devastating consequences. Yet, even in their exile, a glimmer of hope emerged, a testament to God's unwavering love and his promise of redemption. For to Adam and Eve, now banished from the Garden of Paradise, were born children, the first generation to inherit a world forever altered by sin. Cain, their firstborn, entered a world of thorns and thistles, a world where survival demanded toil and sweat. His name, meaning acquired or possessed, hinted at Eve's mingled joy and sorrow. Had she not acquired knowledge both bitter and profound through her disobedience? And yet in Cain she saw the possibility of regaining what was lost, of possessing a future filled with hope. Soon Abel, his name meaning breath or vapor, joined his brother. A shepherd by nature, Abel embodied a gentler spirit, a quiet strength that found solace in tending his flock. In the bleating of sheep and the vastness of open fields, Abel encountered a different facet of God's creation, one that spoke of provision and peace. These two brothers, born of sorrow and hope, represented the divergent paths humanity could choose in this fallen world. One, drawn to the earth and its bounty, sought to master the physical realm. The other, drawn to the heavens and their mysteries, found solace in communion with the divine. Cain, true to his name, gravitated towards the land. He became a tiller of the soil, coaxing forth sustenance from the ground, cursed for his parents' sin. Every seed sown, every furrow ploughed was a testament to both the blessing and the burden of his inheritance. The earth yielded its fruit, but not without struggle, a constant reminder of the brokenness that had entered the world. Abel, in contrast, found his calling in the care of animals. He became a shepherd, his days spent wandering the hills and valleys with his flock. In the rhythms of nature, the birth of lambs, the shearing of wool, Abel discovered a quiet contentment. His was a world of gentle breezes and soft bleating, a stark contrast to the harsh realities his brother faced. Their occupations, though different, were both essential for survival in this new world. Cain provided the sustenance, the fruit of the ground, the bread of life. Abel offered nourishment of a different kind, the meat of his flock, the warmth of their wool, a reminder of God's provision even in the midst of hardship. Yet, despite their interdependence, a subtle rivalry began to brew between the brothers, a tension that mirrored the discord sown in Eden. Time passed, marked by the changing seasons, the cycles of planting and harvest, the birth and death of livestock. And as was their custom, the brothers approached God with offerings, tokens of gratitude for his provision and pleas for his continued favor. Cain, the farmer, brought forth the fruit of his labor, a selection of the finest fruits and grains his fields produced. He arranged them carefully on an altar of rough-hewn stones, a visual testament to his toil and his desire to honor God. Abel, the shepherd, selected the firstborn of his flock, a lamb without blemish, its fleece as white as the clouds that drifted overhead. With a heavy heart, he prepared the sacrifice, the animal's blood staining the altar, a poignant symbol of life given in exchange for sin. Their offerings, though outwardly similar, revealed a profound difference in their hearts. Cain's gift, though carefully chosen, lacked the element of sacrifice, the willingness to surrender something precious and dear. His offering spoke more of obligation than devotion, a perfunctory gesture performed out of duty rather than love. Abel's offering, on the other hand, represented a true sacrifice, a recognition of his own unworthiness and his dependence on God's mercy. The shedding of innocent blood foreshadowed the ultimate sacrifice that God himself would one day make to atone for the sins of humanity. God, in his infinite wisdom, looked upon the offerings of the two brothers, his gaze piercing through outward appearances to the hidden motives of their hearts. And as the smoke from the altars curled upwards towards the heavens, a divine response came, a response that would shatter the fragile peace and unleash a torrent of jealousy and rage. The scriptures tell us that the Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he looked with disfavor. Why this disparity? God, who sees all hearts, recognized the sincerity of Abel's sacrifice, the humble recognition of his need for grace. Cain's offering, lacking this essential element, revealed a heart hardened by pride and self-sufficiency. Cain, his face flushed with anger, watched as his brother's offering found acceptance while his own was met with silence. Jealousy, sharp and corrosive, twisted his gut, poisoning his thoughts and darkening his heart. How could God, the creator of all, show preference to his younger brother, the shepherd, over him, the provider, the tiller of the soil? God, perceiving the turmoil brewing within Cain, approached him not with condemnation but with compassion. "Why are you angry?" he asked, his voice a blend of concern and gentle rebuke. "Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." God's words, offered in love and warning, fell on deaf ears. Cain, consumed by his own bitterness, refused to listen to the voice of reason, the voice of his creator. Jealousy, like a venomous serpent, had taken root in his heart, its coils tightening around his better judgment, squeezing out any remnants of love and compassion he once felt for his brother. Instead of heeding God's warning, Cain allowed resentment to fester, his thoughts turning dark and dangerous. He invited Abel, his voice betraying nothing of the turmoil raging within, to walk with him in the fields. A seemingly innocent invitation that masked a sinister plan. As they walked, the sun dipping below the horizon, casting the landscape in an eerie twilight, Cain turned on his brother, his rage erupting with sudden and terrifying violence. The scriptures offer few details, but the result is clear. Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. The silence that followed the horrific act was deafening. Cain, his hands stained with his brother's blood, stood over Abel's lifeless body, the enormity of his crime crashing over him in waves of horror and disbelief. The world, once so familiar, now seemed alien and menacing, the air thick with the stench of death. God, whose presence once filled the garden, now seemed distant, separated by a gulf of sin too vast to bridge. Yet, even in his self-imposed exile, Cain could not escape the consequences of his actions, for the blood of Abel spilled upon the ground cried out from the earth, a silent scream for justice and retribution. "Where is your brother Abel?" God's voice boomed across the desolate landscape, a question that pierced through Cain's heart like a shard of ice. Cain, his voice trembling with fear and defiance, uttered the first lie in human history. "I don't know," he stammered. "Am I my brother's keeper?" But God, who sees all and knows all, was not deceived. "What have you done?" he thundered. "Listen. Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. The earth itself bore witness to Cain's sin, the very elements revolting against this act of unspeakable cruelty." Section 7. The Mark of a Murderer. Cain's punishment, though severe, was tempered with mercy. He was to be a restless wanderer, an outcast from society, forever marked by his crime. The ground, which had once yielded its bounty to his touch, would now withhold its fruit. His every attempt at cultivation met with frustration and despair. "When you work the ground," God declared, "it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth." Cain, horrified by the prospect of such a lonely and barren existence, cried out in anguish, "My punishment is more than I can bear." He feared not only the physical hardships that awaited him, but also the social isolation, the knowledge that his crime would forever mark him as an outsider. "Everyone who finds me will kill me," he pleaded, his voice raw with terror. God, in an act of compassion, placed a mark on Cain, a sign to protect him from those who would seek revenge for Abel's death. The nature of this mark remains a mystery, but its purpose was clear: to preserve Cain's life even as he lived with the consequences of his sin. Section 8. A Restless Wanderer. And so Cain, burdened by guilt and marked by his crime, departed from the presence of the Lord, a solitary figure banished to wander the earth. He left behind the familiar fields of his youth, the land he had once tilled with such care, now a constant reminder of his loss and his shame. The story of Cain, the first murderer, stands as a stark warning about the destructive power of sin. Jealousy, unchecked, festers and grows, poisoning the heart and twisting even the most natural human affections into something dark and destructive. Cain's descendants, though bearing the mark of his sin, also inherited his ingenuity and creativity. They became builders of cities, craftsmen, musicians, inventors, pioneers in a world still grappling with the consequences of the fall. Their story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, our capacity for both great good and terrible evil. Section 9. A City in the Wilderness. In the land of Nod, east of Eden, Cain found refuge, a place of exile where he sought to rebuild his life, forever haunted by the memory of his crime. There he took a wife, and she bore him a son, whom he named Enoch. With Enoch's birth came a glimmer of hope, a reminder that even in the midst of judgment, God's blessing could still be found. Cain, seeking to establish a legacy for his son, built a city, a testament to human ingenuity, and a symbol of civilization's attempt to create order in a chaotic world. He named the city after his son, Enoch, perpetuating his name and legacy through generations to come. The city became a center of culture and innovation, a testament to the enduring human spirit, our capacity to create and build even in the face of adversity. Section 10. Legacy of Violence, Echoes of Grace. The line of Cain, though marked by violence and tragedy, also reflects God's enduring grace. Through generations, their story intertwines with the lineage of Seth, Adam and Eve's third son, a lineage that will eventually lead to Noah and the promise of a new beginning. The account of Cain and Abel, though a tale of sin and its devastating consequences, also offers a glimmer of hope. God, in his mercy, does not abandon even the most hardened sinner. He hears the cries of the oppressed, offers forgiveness to the repentant, and extends his grace to those who seek him with all their hearts. As we journey through the book of Genesis, we witness the complexities of human nature, our capacity for both great love and unimaginable cruelty. We encounter the consequences of sin, the pain of loss, and the reality of death. Yet we are also reminded of God's unwavering love, his faithfulness to his promises, and his plan to redeem his creation. Section 1. The Book of Generations. And so we turn another page in the ancient scroll of Genesis, entering a chapter that reads like a chronicle of names, a genealogy that bridges the chasm between the garden and the flood. This is the book of the generations of Adam, a testament to the enduring power of life, the continuity of the human story against a backdrop of sin and grace. Here, in these verses, we encounter a litany of names, each one representing a life lived, a story told, a link in the chain that connects us back to our first parents, Adam and Eve. These are not merely names on a page, they are our ancestors, the fathers and mothers who came before us, shaping the world we inherit with their choices, their beliefs, and their unwavering hope for a future touched by God's grace. The genealogies of Genesis may seem at first glance like dry and tedious lists, yet within these seemingly simple verses lies a profound message about the nature of God and his relationship with humanity. For in the midst of human frailty, the brevity of life, and the ever-present reality of sin, God's faithfulness shines through, his promise of redemption echoing down through the generations. Section 2, Adam, father of a multitude. We begin, as we must, with Adam, the first man, formed from the dust of the earth, animated by the breath of God. Adam, whose name means man or earth, embodies both the potential and the fragility of humanity, our connection to the natural world and our capacity for both great good and terrible evil. The text tells us that Adam lived for 930 years, a lifespan almost unimaginable in our modern age. This extraordinary longevity, a hallmark of the antediluvian world, serves as a stark reminder of the chasm that separates us from our earliest ancestors. Yet despite their differences, we share with Adam the same hopes, the same fears, the same longing for connection and meaning. Adam, though banished from the Garden of Eden, becomes the father of a multitude, his descendants spreading across the face of the earth. The text tells us that he had other sons and daughters, their names lost to history, but their lives no less significant in the grand tapestry of God's plan. Each child born into this fledgling human family represented a glimmer of hope, a testament to God's enduring love for his creation. Section 3, Seth. In the image of Adam, in the likeness of God. Among Adam's children, one son stands out, set apart by both his name and his lineage. Seth. Born when Adam was 130 years old, Seth becomes the heir to a legacy both blessed and burdened by the events of the garden. His name, meaning appointed or granted, reflects Eve's belief that he was a special gift from God, a replacement for their beloved Abel, slain by his brother's hand. Genesis tells us that Seth was born in his own likeness, after his image, a phrase that echoes the divine act of creation when God created Adam in his own image. This repetition emphasizes the continuity of God's plan, the transmission of his image and likeness from one generation to the next, even in a world marred by sin. Seth's birth represents a turning point in the narrative, a shift from the immediate consequences of the fall to the gradual unfolding of God's redemptive plan. For it is through the line of Seth, not Cain, that humanity's hope for reconciliation with God will be preserved. Seth, unlike his brother Cain, who turned away from God after his sin, represents a lineage of faith, a line of descent that will eventually lead to Noah, the righteous man who will find favor in God's eyes and become the instrument of humanity's preservation through the flood. Section 4, a lineage of hope, a legacy of faith. The genealogy continues, each generation a stepping stone on the path that leads from the garden to the ark. We encounter names like Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared and Enoch, each one a life lived under the shadow of Eden's loss, yet each one also a testament to the enduring power of faith and the unwavering love of God. These names, though unfamiliar to modern ears, represent real people who walked the earth, loved, lost, hoped and dreamed. They faced challenges we can only imagine, wrestled with questions that still haunt us today, and ultimately found their place in the grand narrative of God's interaction with humanity. Through their lives, we glimpse the development of human civilization, the growth of families, the establishment of cities, and the gradual spread of humanity across the globe. We also witness the ongoing struggle against sin, the consequences of disobedience, and the ever-present reality of death. Yet, even in the midst of these challenges, the thread of God's promise continues to unwind, a beacon of hope illuminating the darkness. For within the lineage of Seth, a spark of faith is kept alive, passed down from one generation to the next, a flickering flame that will one day burst forth into the radiant light of redemption. Section 5. Enosh. Man, fragile and mortal Enosh, Seth's son, enters the world at a time when the memory of Eden is fading into legend, the garden becoming a distant whisper in the hearts of humankind. His name, meaning man or mortal, reflects a growing awareness of human frailty, the brevity of life in the face of eternity. With Enosh, we see a shift in human consciousness, a recognition of their own mortality and their dependence on something greater than themselves. The text tells us that during his lifetime, men began to call upon the name of the Lord. This calling upon the name of the Lord is not necessarily a sign of widespread piety or religious devotion. Rather, it suggests a growing awareness of the transcendent, a longing for something beyond the material world, a recognition of their own limitations and their need for divine help. It is a cry that echoes through the corridors of history, a universal human longing for connection with the divine, a yearning for meaning and purpose in a world often characterized by suffering and loss. Section 6. A cry to the heavens, a longing for transcendence. Kenan, Mahalalel, and Jared follow in the lineage of Seth, their names marking the passage of time, the steady march of generations towards an unknown future. Each generation faces its own unique challenges, its own temptations, its own triumphs and failures. We can only speculate about the specifics of their lives, the details lost to the mists of time. But we can imagine them grappling with the same fundamental questions that have haunted humanity since the fall: the nature of good and evil, the purpose of suffering, the meaning of life and death, and the hope for something beyond this earthly existence. Their calling upon the name of the Lord, first mentioned in connection with Enosh, continues, a persistent undercurrent in the human story. It is a cry for guidance, for comfort, for deliverance from the pain and uncertainty of life in a fallen world. And though the scriptures don't reveal the specifics of their prayers or the nature of God's responses, we can trust that He heard their cries and met them in their need, just as He continues to do for those who seek Him today. Section 7. Kenan, a life measured in years, a legacy etched in time. Kenan, whose name means possession or sorrow, lives a long life, fathering Mahalalel at the age of 70 and dying at the ripe old age of 910. His life, though measured in years, represents more than just a number. It embodies the hopes, dreams, struggles and triumphs of a generation striving to make sense of their place in the world. What did Kenan possess in this life? What sorrows did he endure? The scriptures offer no easy answers, leaving us to ponder the mysteries of his existence, the legacy etched in the lines of his descendants' faces but lost to the written record. Yet even in the absence of specific details, we can glean insights into Kenan's world through the broader narrative of Genesis. We know he lived in a time when humanity was still grappling with the consequences of sin, a time when violence and corruption were rampant, a time when the memory of Eden's paradise stood in stark contrast to the harsh realities of daily life. And yet, amidst these challenges, Kenan and his generation clung to the hope of redemption, the promise passed down from Adam that one day God would make all things new. This hope, though often tested, sustained them through trials and tribulations, a beacon of light in a world shrouded in darkness. Section 8. Mahalalel, the glory of God reflected in humanity. Mahalalel, Canaan's son, bears a name that points to the transcendent, a name that speaks of God's majesty and power. Mahalalel means the blessed God, or God is glorious, a testament to the enduring belief in a power greater than themselves, a force that governs the universe and holds the key to their ultimate destiny. His name stands in stark contrast to the prevailing trend of human sinfulness, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the light of God's glory continues to shine, reflected in the hearts of those who seek him. Mahalalel's life, though largely unrecorded, serves as a testament to the power of faith, the ability of one person to make a difference in a world often consumed by darkness. For it is through his lineage, passed down through his son Jared, that the line of hope continues, a thread of righteousness woven into the tapestry of human history. We can only imagine the stories Mahalalel shared with his children and grandchildren, tales of God's faithfulness, his power, and his unwavering love for his creation. These stories, passed down through generations, would serve as a source of strength and encouragement as humanity navigated the treacherous waters of a fallen world. Jared, Mahalalel's son, lives to be one of the oldest men recorded in Scripture, a staggering 962 years. His name, meaning descent or coming down, takes on a poignant significance in light of the growing wickedness that characterizes this period in human history. The book of Genesis tells us that during this time the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Humanity, created in God's image, had strayed far from its original design, its heart corrupted by sin, its actions a testament to the depths of its depravity. Jared's long life spans a period of increasing darkness, a descent into sin and rebellion that will culminate in the judgment of the flood. Yet even amidst this moral decay, we see glimmers of hope, reminders of God's enduring grace and his plan to redeem his creation. For it is through Jared's son Enoch, whose name means dedicated or trained up, that we catch a glimpse of a different path, a life lived in close communion with God, a testament to the power of faith to illuminate even the darkest of times. Enoch's story stands in stark contrast to the prevailing wickedness of his day. Unlike his contemporaries who abandoned themselves to sin and corruption, Enoch walked with God, a phrase that speaks of intimacy, obedience, and a life surrendered to the will of the Almighty. The scriptures tell us that Enoch walked with God for 300 years, a testament to the transformative power of faith and the joy of living in close fellowship with the Creator. His life, though relatively short compared to his forefathers, stands as a beacon of light in a world spiraling towards judgment. And then, in a moment that defies human understanding, Enoch is taken by God, spared from the experience of death that awaited all humanity. The text simply states that Enoch walked with God and he was not, for God took him. This enigmatic statement has been the subject of much speculation and interpretation throughout history. Some see it as a literal, physical ascension, a foreshadowing of the rapture that awaits believers at the end of time. Others interpret it more metaphorically as a testament to the power of faith to transcend the limitations of this earthly existence. Regardless of the precise interpretation, Enoch's story serves as a powerful reminder that God honors those who walk faithfully with him. It is a story of hope, encouragement, and the promise of a future where sin and death will be no more. As we approach the conclusion of our journey through the first 6 chapters of Genesis, we find ourselves in a world increasingly distant from the idyllic paradise of Eden. The stain of sin introduced through Adam and Eve's disobedience has spread like a creeping blight, corrupting the very heart of humanity. The line of Seth, though intended as a beacon of hope, a lineage through which God's redemptive plan would unfold, has become increasingly entangled with the descendants of Cain, their lives intertwined in a complex tapestry of faith and compromise, righteousness and rebellion. The world, once teeming with the vibrancy of God's creation, now groans under the weight of sin, its beauty marred by violence, its harmony shattered by discord. The cries of the oppressed, the innocent victims of unchecked wickedness, rise up to the heavens, a chorus of pain and despair that cannot be ignored. Genesis 6:5 tells us that the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. This statement, stark and unsettling, reveals the depths of humanity's descent, the pervasiveness of sin's grip on the human heart. Section 2. The sons of God, the daughters of men. Adding to the escalating chaos is a cryptic and troubling passage that has puzzled theologians and scholars for centuries. The account of the sons of God taking wives from among the daughters of men. This enigmatic interlude, sandwiched between genealogies and the account of Noah, raises more questions than it answers. Who were these sons of God? Were they fallen angels, as some interpretations suggest, beings of a higher order who abandoned their heavenly abode to indulge in forbidden unions with human women? Or were they, as others propose, descendants of Seth, those who had remained faithful to God, but who, through intermarriage with the descendants of Cain, had compromised their lineage and corrupted their faith? Genesis offers no definitive answer, leaving the interpretation open to debate. Yet, regardless of the precise identity of these sons of God, the consequences of their actions are clear. Their unions, driven by lust and a disregard for God's established order, resulted in a further blurring of the lines between the sacred and the profane, the righteous and the wicked. The offspring of these unions, described as mighty men and men of renown, only exacerbated the problem. Instead of ushering in an era of peace and prosperity, their strength and influence were often used for selfish gain, their exploits becoming the stuff of legends, tales of violence and oppression that fueled the growing darkness. Section 3. A corruption of flesh and spirit. The intermingling of the divine and the human, the sacred and the profane, had catastrophic consequences for the human race. Sin, once a serpent's whisper in the garden, had become a roaring lion, devouring all that stood in its path. The corruption ran deep, affecting not only the actions of humankind, but also their very nature. Genesis chapter 6, verses 11 to 12 paints a bleak picture. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. The world, created by God as a testament to his goodness and beauty, had become a distorted reflection of its creator, a testament to the destructive power of sin. The harmony that once existed between God, humanity, and creation had been shattered, replaced by a chasm of separation, a gulf of sin too vast for humanity to bridge on its own. Section 4. Noah, a righteous man in a wicked age. Yet even in the midst of this impending judgment, a glimmer of hope remained. For in the midst of this wicked generation there lived a man named Noah, a descendant of Seth, who found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Noah, whose name means rest or comfort, stands in stark contrast to the prevailing wickedness of his day. Genesis chapter 6 verse 9 describes him as a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Noah's righteousness was not a product of his own doing. It was a gift from God, a manifestation of his grace in a world desperate for redemption. Like his ancestor Enoch, Noah walked with God, his life a testament to the power of faith to illuminate even the darkest of nights. In a world consumed by selfishness, violence, and corruption, Noah stood as a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the midst of judgment, God remembers his promises and preserves a remnant for himself. He would become the instrument of God's mercy, the keeper of a promise that would extend beyond the flood and resonate throughout history. Section 5, the Ark. A sanctuary, a promise, a new beginning. God, in his infinite wisdom, chose to spare Noah and his family, a microcosm of humanity, from the impending deluge. He instructed Noah to build an ark, a massive vessel of gopher wood sealed with pitch, its dimensions carefully prescribed, a testament to the precision of God's plan. The ark, more than just a boat, represented a sanctuary, a place of refuge from the storm, a tangible symbol of God's protection and provision. It was a floating womb, a vessel of new life, carrying within its wooden ribs the seeds of a new beginning, a fresh start for a world drowning in sin. God commanded Noah to bring into the ark 2 of every living creature, male and female, to preserve their kind from the coming destruction. This act of preservation, a testament to the sanctity of all life, foreshadowed God's enduring love for his creation and his desire to redeem what had been lost. The ark, floating upon the face of the deep, became a powerful symbol of God's judgment and his mercy, a reminder that even in the midst of wrath, he remembers those who are faithful. It marked both an end and a beginning, the close of one chapter in human history and the dawn of a new era, one in which humanity would have the opportunity to walk with God in a world washed clean and